you kind of split this out, the CFPB has proposed two alternatives. One is that I see we have another question.
Go ahead. You want to finish your thought?
Yeah. Well, one is on this idea of delivery is one that the lender is responsible for the delivery, the preparation and delivery of the CDF, this closing disclosure form, and the other is that your title company, the settlement services provider, retains the responsibility for the delivery. And we'll talk about the implications of that after we get to this next question here.
All right, another short sale question. So in short sales, we often have to submit 10 to 15 changes to HUD in the process. The last stages, including buyer's fees, don't happen to the last HUD. Will all HUDs in process require 3-day wait or just the final HUD after lender submits fees to title?
That's another great question. And actually, that's not a question I have heard before. So thank you for asking it. And the understanding currently is that only the final HUD will require that wait, only the one that the consumer is actually going to sign. So all of those, 10 to 15 HUDs that go back and forth in the short sale process, those can still go back and forth and get the details worked out. What will probably be a more significant change will be once you've locked in those final numbers from the buyer side, they really can't change. They're not going to be able to change after that 3 days. And in that respect, perhaps the short sale process will kind of aid because already those numbers can't change on the seller's side. Perhaps it will aid in actually making that happen earlier. I think what you'll see both in the settlement services side and the lender side is we will need to move significant parts of the process earlier in the transaction. We're not going to be able to fix something in 24 hours anymore. There's no more quick redraw. You come in the morning, we'll sign, wife will come in at 10 and sign, we'll run documents back to the lender and we're going to wrap this up. Those types of scenarios are probably going to be a thing of the past. And since we all know that people schedule minor surgical procedures and their dream vacation while they're also buying or selling real estate, and again, that's a little tongue-in-cheek, but it always seems to be that everything happens at once. There's some significant implications for delays. And I think that in short sales specifically. So let's talk a little bit more about this delivery responsibility idea and think about perhaps what some of the issues that may arise there are. If the lender is going to ultimately be responsible for the preparation and delivery of the final disclosure, the CDF, our HUD and truth in lending disclosure, what types of process changes and cooperation are going to need to occur, that would be a very, very significant change from the way things are done today. And ultimately, it would end up that the lender is delivering a document that traditionally the title company has prepared and has owned that document. The other alternative, which is greatly preferred both by the settlement services industry and by lenders, I will tell you, is that the settlement services industry continues to provide that document. But now we run into another interesting scenario in that it makes us responsible for preparing the lender's final disclosure and delivering it to their consumer. What are the implications then if we now are preparing a document for which the lender has liability? Go back and think about that concept of compliance partnerships and what type of change that may drive into the settlement services industry and into lenders' processes and cooperation between title companies, settlement service providers, and between lenders. I want to back up real quick to number 4, the 3-day rule, because there is currently a proposal that be changed from $100 to $250. And a major lender did a regression study on I think all of their loans, or at least a significant portion that they had originated in the last 12 months. And they said, look, if you can change this to $250, it's a lot more tolerable level for us. at $100, we are likely redisclosing on as many as half of our loans. So this is not going to create a great experience for the consumer. So one of the things that I think we have to remember is we're in a very dynamic period of time. These are proposals. We're bringing them to you now because we'll have answers on these in early fall, and the implications we should start thinking about now. So moving on quickly here to number 6, 7, 8, and 9. Limited closing cost increases, which we have discussed, very similar to existing law, unless an exception applies, though charges for the following services have a zero tolerance. So not the $100 or $250, but any charges that a lender would charge, any company that charges a fee that the lender has an affiliation with, those would be zero tolerance fees. So any fee that would be added after the disclosure provided by an affiliate of the lender or the lender's own services, those fees can't go up at all. And if they change at all, you're talking about the 3-day redisclosure there. So very, very tight tolerances on what the lender can change in that 3-day period of time, if at all. APRs are going to go up across the board. And that is not anything other than a factor of the definition of an APR is going to be redefined. And one of the big things is it's going to include normal title and escrow charges. And it probably always should have included those things, and now it will. And the implication there is if your buyer closed a loan at 4.5% on the old HUD and they close at 4.5% on the new HUD, all things being equal, sales price and fees, the APR is going to show higher in the new world of closing disclosure forms. Record keeping is an interesting new idea as well. So lenders need to keep records of the loan estimate and the closing disclosure. And they have to keep those for 3 years unless there is some other enforcing agency that requires more. But they're saying now that they need to be kept in what's called standard machine readable format. And so that means they want this information in a data format, not a PDF. So they don't want to receive large files, compressed files full of closing disclosure forms and loan estimates. What they want is a continuous stream of data or a packet of data that shows what has happened to that form over the life of the form. And someone needs to be able and prepared to provide that information to the CFPB. So there again, you run into some interesting issues. If lenders are providing the information, certainly they will for the early disclosures, the new loan estimate forms. But if settlement services and title companies are providing that information and they end up preparing the final form, let's go back to compliance partnerships. Our industries will need to work out how it is that we provide that data on behalf of a lender to the CFPB. So some significant implications for the way that our industries need to work together. And, I bring that up, again, going back to thinking about consumers rely on realtors for financial information. They rely on them for a gauge on whether the process is appropriate or correct. This information will be very important. Understanding what's kind of going on beneath the surface, I think, is going to be very important to running your business and creating an expectation as we go through really what is going to be, I don't think it's unfair to say, a historic change in the way that disclosures are prepared and delivered to consumers in residential real estate mortgages. So, as I said earlier, the target date for the final rule is fall of 2013. Certainly, the CFPB has said that they understand that there are extensive revisions that have to be made, extensive training that will have to be conducted in order to make this work. If any of you remember the implementation period of HUD 2010, it's a bit dicey. Some unanswered questions, I think, remain. Will there simply be a cutoff date? Will we be allowed to close on both forms for a period of time? What is that going to look like for lenders? Will they have to run dual compliance systems? For settlement services providers, will they have to be able to produce different documents? and there are some implications. So target date is early fall of 2013. They will go into another comment period. I think it's 30 days, and then they'll lock down the final rule. Implementation will begin in January and will roll out, they are saying at the moment, over the next 12 to 18 months. So it is not too early to begin this discussion. So let's take a look at the new forms and talk about the goals in designing the forms. And this is where I would go back to the really positive piece of this whole message, which is I think we've ended up with better forms. And so the stated goals in redesigning these forms were obviously to improve the consumer's understanding of mortgage loan transactions and eliminate confusion. Also to facilitate compliance with laws that are already on the books, the Truth in Lending Disclosure and Real Estate Settlement Procedures Act. And also they state to be mindful of small business concerns, understanding that it's going to take a lot. It will be a massive effort to make this work in the industry. If you think about the implications simply of redesigning software, compliance is going to be costly. Our industry will spend certainly well into the 7, perhaps 8 figures retooling and reconfiguring our systems, and the lending industry will do the same. It will be significant. So if you think about those old forms, though, the good faith estimate, the truth in lending, and the HUD-1 statement, really these were 3 separate forms designed by 3 separate agencies for 3 separate purposes. And while those of us that are in the industry might be able to quickly look at those forms and understand where something from the good faith estimate ends up on the HUD and how and why it has changed, those changes are not readily apparent to a consumer. And these new forms, I really do think, fix that. So let's compare the HUD-1 lines to the closing disclosure form. So this is a sample of the new loan estimate, and the new loan estimate takes the place of the good faith estimate and early truth in lending disclosure. And so you look over this form, page 1 has loan details, loan terms, projected payments, and right at the bottom of that form, it will say how much cash is projected for the borrower to bring in to close. Big, bold, yes, no answers, and I can tell you everything on this form, from the shading to the font, was very hotly debated, and I think we've come out with a decent form. Page 2, loan costs, settlement costs.